Paper 146. First Preaching Tour of Galilee. The first public preaching tour of Galilee began on Sunday, January 18, AD 28, and continued for about 2 months, ending with the return to Capernaum on March 17. On this tour, Jesus and the 12 apostles, assisted by the former apostles of John, preached the gospel and baptized believers in Rimmon, Jotapata, Ramah, Zebulun, Iron, Gishala, Chorazin, Madon, Cana, Nain, and Endor. In these cities they tarried and taught, while in many other smaller towns they proclaimed the gospel of the kingdom as they passed through. This was the first time Jesus permitted his associates to preach without restraint. On this tour he cautioned them on only 3 occasions. He admonished them to remain away from Nazareth, and to be discreet when passing through Capernaum and Tiberias. It was a source of great satisfaction to the apostles at last to feel they were at liberty to preach and teach without restriction, and they threw themselves into the work of preaching the gospel, ministering to the sick, and baptizing believers with great earnestness and joy. 1. Preaching at Rimmon. The small city of Rimmon had once been dedicated to the worship of a Babylonian god of the air, Ramon. Many of the earlier Babylonian and later Zoroastrian teachings were still embraced in the beliefs of the Rimmonites. Therefore did Jesus and the 24 devote much of their time to the task of making plain the difference between these older beliefs and the new gospel of the kingdom. Peter here preached one of the great sermons of his early career on Aaron and the golden calf. Although many of the citizens of Rimmon became believers in Jesus' teachings, they made great trouble for their brethren in later years. It is difficult to convert nature worshippers to the full fellowship of the adoration of a spiritual ideal during the short space of a single lifetime. Many of the better of the Babylonian and Persian ideas of light and darkness, good and evil, time and eternity, were later incorporated in the doctrines of so-called Christianity, and their inclusion rendered the Christian teachings more immediately acceptable to the peoples of the Near East. In like manner, the inclusion of many of Plato's theories of the ideal spirit or invisible patterns of all things visible and material, as later adapted by Philo to the Hebrew theology, made Paul's Christian teachings more easy of acceptance by the Western Greeks. It was at Rimmon that Todan first heard the gospel of the kingdom, and he later carried this message into Mesopotamia and far beyond. He was among the first to preach the good news to those who dwelt beyond the Euphrates. 2. At Jotapata. While the common people of Jotapata heard Jesus and his apostles gladly, and many accepted the gospel of the kingdom, it was the discourse of Jesus to the 24 on the second evening of their sojourn in this small town that distinguishes the Jotapata mission. Nathanael was confused in his mind about the Master's teachings concerning prayer, thanksgiving, and worship, and in response to his question, Jesus spoke at great length in further explanation of his teaching. Summarized in modern phraseology, this discourse may be presented as emphasizing the following points. 1. The conscious and persistent regard for iniquity in the heart of man gradually destroys the prayer connection of the human soul with the spirit circuits of communication between man and his Maker. Naturally, God hears the petition of his child, but when the human heart deliberately and persistently harbors the concepts of iniquity, there gradually ensues the loss of personal communion between the earth child and his heavenly Father. 2. That prayer which is inconsistent with the known and established laws of God is an abomination to the paradise deities. If man will not listen to the gods as they speak to their creation in the laws of spirit, mind, and matter, the very act of such deliberate and conscious disdain by the creature turns the ears of spirit personalities away from hearing the personal petitions of such lawless and disobedient mortals. Jesus quoted to his apostles from the prophet Zechariah, "But they refused to hearken, and pulled away the shoulder, and stopped their ears, that they should not hear. Yes, they made their hearts adamant like a stone, lest they should hear my law, and the words which I sent by my Spirit through the prophets. Therefore did the results of their evil thinking come as a great wrath upon their guilty heads. And so it came to pass that they cried for mercy, but there was no ear open to hear." And then Jesus quoted the proverb of the wise man who said, He who turns away his ear from hearing the divine law, even his prayer shall be an abomination. 3. By opening the human end of the channel of the God-man communication, mortals make immediately available the ever-flowing stream of divine ministry to the creatures of the worlds. When man hears God's Spirit speak within the human heart, inherent in such an experience is the fact that God simultaneously hears that man's prayer. Even the forgiveness of sin operates in this same unerring fashion. The Father in heaven has forgiven you even before you have thought to ask Him, but such forgiveness is not available in your personal religious experience until such a time as you forgive your fellow men. God's forgiveness, in fact, is not conditioned upon your forgiving your fellows, but in experience it is exactly so conditioned. And this fact of the synchrony of divine and human forgiveness was thus recognized and linked together in the prayer which Jesus taught the apostles. 4. There is a basic law of justice in the universe which mercy is powerless to circumvent. The unselfish glories of paradise are not possible of reception by a thoroughly selfish creature of the realms of time and space. Even the infinite love of God cannot force the salvation of eternal survival upon any mortal creature who does not choose to survive. Mercy has great latitude of bestowal, but, after all, there are mandates of justice which even love combined with mercy cannot effectively abrogate. Again, Jesus quoted from the Hebrew Scriptures, "I have called, and you refused to hear. I stretched out my hand, but no man regarded. You have set at naught all my counsel, and you have rejected my reproof. And because of this rebellious attitude, it becomes inevitable that you shall call upon me and fail to receive an answer. Having rejected the way of life, you may seek me diligently in your times of suffering, but you will not find me." 5. They who would receive mercy must show mercy. Judge not, that you be not judged. With the spirit with which you judge others, you also shall be judged. Mercy does not wholly abrogate universe fairness. In the end it will prove true. Whoso stops his ears to the cry of the poor, he also shall some day cry for help, and no one will hear him. The sincerity of any prayer is the assurance of its being heard. The spiritual wisdom and universe consistency of any petition is the determiner of the time, manner, and degree of the answer. A wise father does not literally answer the foolish prayers of his ignorant and inexperienced children, albeit the children may derive much pleasure and real soul satisfaction from the making of such absurd petitions. 6. When you have become wholly dedicated to the doing of the will of the Father in heaven, the answer to all your petitions will be forthcoming, because your prayers will be in full accordance with the Father's will, and the Father's will is ever manifest throughout his vast universe. What the true Son desires and the infinite Father wills is. Such a prayer cannot remain unanswered, and no other sort of petition can possibly be fully answered. 7. The cry of the righteous is the faith act of the child of God which opens the door of the Father's storehouse of goodness, truth, and mercy, and these good gifts have long been in waiting for the Son's approach and personal appropriation. Prayer does not change the divine attitude toward man, but it does change man's attitude toward the changeless Father. The motive of the prayer gives it right of way to the divine ear, not the social, economic, or outward religious status of the one who prays. 8. Prayer may not be employed to avoid the delays of time or to transcend the handicaps of space. Prayer is not designed as a technique for aggrandizing self or for gaining unfair advantage over one's fellows. A thoroughly selfish soul cannot pray in the true sense of the word. Said Jesus, "Let your supreme delight be in the character of God, and he shall surely give you the sincere desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in him, and he will act. For the Lord hears the cry of the needy, and he will regard the prayer of the destitute." 9. I have come forth from the Father. If, therefore, you are ever in doubt as to what you would ask of the Father, ask in my name, and I will present your petition in accordance with your real needs and desires, and in accordance with my Father's will. Guard against the great danger of becoming self-centered in your prayer.